Once every few thousand years, the Earth's crust doesn't just shift. It suddenly slips, and quickly. Like the skin of an orange separating from its flesh. The result is total global destruction. Civilizations wiped off the face of the Earth. Mountains thrown into the sea. Continents swallowed whole. It sounds like a typical story you might find in the dusty corners of conspiracy theory internet. Probably somewhere between rumors about Bigfoot and theories about a hollow Earth. But here's the plot twist. All of this is described in a book that was classified by the CIA. And for decades, large portions of it remained inaccessible. I mean, blacked out lines and missing pages, the real deal with seals and everything, just like the government usually does. But honestly, when I first heard about this, I rolled my eyes. The Adam and Eve story sounds like complete nonsense. So I did what any skeptic would do. I personally checked the declassified CIA archives. And there it was. The Adam and Eve story by Chan Thomas. Right on the CIA website. A declassified document of 55 pages with at least 150 more still hidden. Well, how about that? But who is this guy? Chan Thomas. And what is it that he wrote that made someone in Langley say, "Yeah, let's classify this as top secret"? Here's the mystery we're going to unravel today. Is the story of Adam and Eve a carefully hidden truth about ancient cataclysms? Something we're not meant to know about? Or is it just pseudoscientific nonsense? Let's go back to the early 1960s, the era of the Cold War. The governments of nuclear countries are ready to press the red button at any moment. The USA and the Soviet Union are competing in an arms race, and it's not just about bombs and missiles, but also about ideas. The mind became the new frontier. As a result, the apocalypse seems all too close. And in this atmosphere of paranoia, secrecy, and scientific ambition, a man named Chan Thomas decided to write a book. And he wasn't just some fringe character with a typewriter. He was an engineer, worked with aerospace companies, and by all accounts was directly involved with cutting-edge mid-century technologies. However, the details of his biography are murky, which of course only adds to the intrigue. But Thomas was undoubtedly part of the scientific community. In 1963, he self-published The Adam and Eve Story. This means the book wasn't released by major publishers and there was no big announcement. Just an unremarkable book, printed and distributed by Thomas himself. But the content? Let's just say it was far from a light read. Thomas claimed that he had discovered the lost truth about Earth's past and its future, supposedly that the history of human civilization is not linear, but cyclical. Everything is wiped out every few thousand years by catastrophic events. In short, some truly fantastic things. But here's what's really interesting. Decades after Thomas's book was published, it suddenly appeared in the declassified CIA archives. It was formatted like any other Cold War document. But let me remind you, this wasn't an intelligence report, but a self-published apocalyptic theory. What's even stranger is that large portions of the text were blacked out with redaction bars, entire chapters missing. No one knows exactly when or why this book ended up at the CIA. Did someone at the agency actually decide that Thomas was right? Maybe it was circulated in intelligence circles as speculative science. Or was the book simply archived and forgotten or deliberately redacted? For conspiracy theorists, the answer is obvious. The CIA is hiding the truth. And for skeptics, it's just a curiosity from the Cold War era, when the government showed interest in anything and everything, no matter how absurd. But what happened to Chan Thomas himself? After the Adam and Eve story, he didn't disappear. In fact, he turned to a different subject. He wrote about spirituality, extrasensory perception, and the intersection of science and religion. He gave lectures and continued to publish. At one point, he even worked at an aerospace company that was connected to defense, which, of course, only added fuel to the fire. Hello there. Thomas's fame faded. His theories never caught on in mainstream science, and everyone forgot about him. He died in 1998 at the age of 78. No dramatic disappearance, no deathbed confession. Just a long, strange career that began with engineering and ended with mysticism. But even after his death, his book continued to live on, quietly spreading among conspiracy communities until one day, the internet didn't dig it up from the CIA archives. That's when the story of Adam and Eve stopped being a marginal curiosity and became a myth and a government stamp. Even if the theory is complete fiction, the sense of a government conspiracy remains. So, what exactly did the story of Adam and Eve claim? In fact, its main idea is simple. Terrifying but simple. Did Antimas believe that the Earth's crust, that is, the solid shell we live on, does not remain stationary? Every few thousand years, it shifts, not gradually, not because of tectonic plates. He claimed that every few thousand years, the Earth's crust suddenly slips over the inner layers, oceans, continents, and so on. And all of this happens within just a few hours. Imagine the planet's crust rotating like a detached orange peel, while the core stays in place. Next, according to his theory, complete global devastation follows. Earthquakes, floods, winds stronger than anything we've ever recorded. And perhaps worst of all, instant continental freezing. Thomas claimed that this is not a one-time catastrophe, but a cyclical process that occurs approximately every 6,500 years. Civilization develops, settles in, builds monuments, creates myths, and then nature hits the reset button. He believed that this is the true cycle of human history. Creation and destruction, over and over again. In his book, Thomas describes this process in chilling detail. According to him, when the crust shifts, the oceans spill out of their basins. Giant waves crash onto the continents, entire mountain ranges collapse, cities disappear beneath water or ice. And in some places, especially in the north, the shift causes such a sudden drop in temperature that everything freezes instantly. Thomas himself claimed that he had seen evidence of the most recent such event, probably in secret CIA documents. Overall, he supported his theory with legends from all over the world. Atlantis. It was a civilization destroyed by just such a shift. The biblical flood, the same thing. Ancient ruins buried under sand or ice are the remnants of destroyed worlds. Even the Old Testament destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. For Thomas, all of this was part of the same cycle. He believed these were not just myths, but rather fragmented memories of real events passed down through time. And worst of all, according to his chronology, our time is already running out. Thomas never specified the exact date of the next catastrophe, but he made it clear it would be the last one. The one that ended the Ice Age happened about 11,500 years ago. Do the math yourself. If the cycle repeats roughly every 6,500 years, then we've been living on borrowed time for quite a while. This means that the next major catastrophe could potentially happen at any given moment, without warning. And yes, some modern supporters of his theory believe that a new crustal shift could happen as soon as the 21st century, possibly within our lifetime. One moment, blue skies and everyday life. The next, earthquakes, floods, and entire regions covered in ice. And even if this theory sounds absurd, you have to admit there's something unsettling about it. The sheer scale of destruction. The remarkable coincidence with ancient flood myths. And the fact that this book, with all its apocalyptic claims, ended up in the CIA archives marked as secret. Maybe Thomas was wrong. Maybe he was just a dreamer with a tendency to dramatize things. But what if... not a dreamer. What if he was right? Are we really living on a bomb and no one has told us about it? Alright, let's imagine that Chan Thomas was right and the Earth's crust really can slide over the molten core like the skin of a fruit. No tectonics, no slow drift. Just a sudden, instantaneous shift that turns civilizations into mass graves. So, the main question is, what would it take from a scientific standpoint? In reality, to even begin moving the Earth's crust as a single shell, you'd have to overcome its friction with the mantle. And that's not so easy since we're talking about a rigid layer. Rocks ranging from 30 to 70 kilometers thick depending on the location. Let's simplify things and take the minimum, 30. The mass of the crust alone is estimated at about 26 sextillion kilograms. That's 21 zeros in the number. But if we want to move this mass globally, not gradually but abruptly, we need to apply an enormous force to set the crust in motion over the mantle. According to basic physics, force equals mass times acceleration. If we assume that the crust only needs to accelerate by 1 meter per second squared, and that's a pretty gentle push on a planetary scale, then you would already need 26 sextillion newtons of force, or the same amount of joules per meter. For comparison, a magnitude 9 earthquake releases about a quintillion joules of energy. That's 10,000 times less than what is needed just to start our process. Moreover, even the giant asteroid known as Chicxulub didn't have enough energy for this. To move the Earth's crust, you would need as much energy as would be released by the simultaneous impact of not 2, not 10, but 5,000 asteroids like Chicxulub. Just think about that. A single such impact wiped out 75% of all life on Earth and likely caused the extinction of the dinosaurs. Now multiply that by 5,000 and you get the amount of energy capable of killing an entire planet. That's equivalent to detonating 1,600 billion nuclear bombs at once. And that's, mind you, just to get the crust moving. By the way, the heat that will inevitably be generated after this process will be more than enough to boil the oceans, ignite the atmosphere, and vaporize most of the biosphere in a matter of seconds. Simply put, if this really happened, Earth wouldn't just change catastrophically. It would literally be boiled. But let's suppose the scale of the disaster is smaller. Maybe it's not about the entire crust. Perhaps only large sections shift abruptly due to electromagnetic forces, as Thomas suggests. He hypothesized that powerful solar activity combined with a pole reversal could create such a strong geomagnetic pulse that it would disrupt the stability of the crust. That already sounds a bit more plausible, doesn't it? The Sun really does produce giant coronal mass ejections. They can disable satellites, power grids, and even temporarily disrupt the Earth's magnetic field. The most powerful ones we've observed, according to various estimates, can carry up to 60 septillion joules of energy. And it seems that's even more than what would be needed for a superflare. But there's a catch. This energy from the entire ejection is spread out over a vast area in space. And what actually reaches Earth is billions of times weaker. But let's suppose, for the sake of experiment, that it did happen. Some unknown cosmic force triggered a superflare and at the same time didn't turn the planet's surface into lava. What would we see then? First of all, massive rupture zones. Global tectonic faults open up overnight. Coastlines disappear. Tsunamis don't just crash onto the shore, they sweep cities hundreds of kilometers inland. Skyscrapers fly apart like building blocks. Countries go underwater within hours. Mountains are leveled to the ground. Valleys become oceans. Next come the climatic consequences. If, for example, North America suddenly shifts closer to the Arctic, the temperature drops. Not over decades, but within days. Forests freeze instantly. Rivers turn into glaciers overnight. And conversely, regions of eternal cold suddenly become tropics. Plants die, animals go extinct, and civilization collapses not only because of destruction, but also due to hunger, chaos, and global disorganization. And the truth is, if all this had really happened in the past, we would see the evidence. We would find traces of tsunamis where there are now deserts. We would see simultaneous extinctions on every continent. We would have geological layers indicating massive shifts that happened instantly, not over thousands of years. Entire sections of the Earth's crust would bear signs of colossal displacement. The whole land would be covered in scars. Megafaults would cut across continents like knife wounds. Coastlines would have risen or sunk by hundreds of meters. Add to that absolute chaos in the climate. In the geological layers, we would have and see clear, instantaneous changes. Forests would turn into tundra within days. Coral reefs would be frozen in the middle of their growth. You see, you can't reboot the whole planet without leaving traces. But when we look for evidence of such events, we don't see them, not even close. All geological records point to gradual changes. Ice ages come and go over tens of thousands of years. Earthquakes are always local, not global. Plate tectonics explains mountains, continental drift, and oceanic trenches. All of this happens slowly and sequentially. In other words, there is no evidence that the Earth's crust made a 180-degree turn and dragged the continents across the planet over a single weekend. And yet, supporters of the Adam and Eve story assure you that the evidence is everywhere. So let's take a look at their so-called ironclad arguments. And let's see if they can withstand even the most basic fact-checking. Let's start with the Sphinx, or more precisely, the claim that traces of water erosion on the Great Sphinx of Giza prove it is much older than is commonly believed. Followers of Chan Thomas claim that the vertical grooves on the body of the Sphinx could only have formed as a result of prolonged heavy rains which have not occurred in Egypt for thousands of years. Therefore, they argue the Sphinx must have been built before the Sahara became a desert. And then Atlantis, cataclysms, crustal shifts, and the whole usual set get brought into the discussion. But here's a more down-to-earth explanation. Yes, this erosion does indeed resemble water erosion, but most likely it was caused by the accumulation of rainwater around the base of the monument after it was already built. Egyptologists and geologists who have studied this site for years assure us that the lines on the Sphinx do not indicate some ancient monsoon era. It's simply the result of carving a giant statue out of rock and leaving it to collect water around it for centuries. No global crustal shifts are actually needed. Next up are the famous frozen mammoths in Siberia. And not just frozen, but instantly frozen, right in the middle of eating, with unchewed grass in their mouths, supposedly due to a sudden climatic collapse caused by a shift of the Earth's crust. And of course, that sounds creepy. At least until you look at the facts. It's true that quite a few mammoth remains have indeed been found in permafrost. Some are well preserved. But that's because permafrost is a natural freezer, not because the animals were instantly frozen. Most likely they died from cold, starvation, or fell into traps and were gradually covered by ice. And what about the undigested remains? In ruminant animals like mammoths, there is always food in the stomach. That's just how a multi-chambered digestive system works. It's not evidence of an apocalypse. It's just basic biology. Alright, but what about the flood myths? Almost every ancient culture has its own version of a global flood. From the Epic of Gilgamesh and Noah's Ark to Hindu and Mayan legends, Chan Thomas considered this a collective memory of a truly global catastrophe. But here's a much more boring and much more logical explanation. People have always settled near water. Rivers, lakes, and coastlines were vital for agriculture, fishing, and trade. And water has a tendency to flood everything around it from time to time. Rivers overflow their banks, deltas shift, monsoons come. When this happens, people remember, record, and turn it into stories. And through generations, these local floods turn into epics. So the global collection of flood myths is not evidence of a single global flood. It's evidence that water is dangerous and that humanity's collective memory isn't so bad after all. Okay, the last piece of evidence for Chan Thomas's theory, the Piri Reis map. A favorite topic among fans of lost civilizations. They say this map, created in 1513, shows the coast of Antarctica without ice. So, someone must have mapped this territory thousands of years ago before it froze over. And again, crustal displacement, lost history, and so on down the list. Or maybe it's just bad cartography. The Peary race map was compiled from older sources, and some of them were frankly speculative. But the Antarctica that everyone points to is most likely a distorted rendering of the South American coastline. So, it's just a simple mistake, not a revelation. Even professional cartographers have repeatedly debunked this theory. There is no evidence that anyone has ever seen Antarctica without ice. In fact, there isn't even evidence that anyone knew about its existence before the 19th century. Now let's take a step back. Because even if you put together all these claims, Fink's erosion, mammoths, myths, maps, they don't add up to what Chan Thomas described. There is no evidence in the geological record of a sudden global shift of the Earth's crust. None at all. The Earth's surface does change, no doubt about it. But this happens because of plate tectonics, not because of abrupt planetary whims. The slow movement of plates, driven by convection in the mantle, explains everything, from earthquakes to mountain ranges. There's no need to invent science fiction here. The crust slides, it drifts, and it has been doing so for billions of years. And what about the so-called science in the story of Adam and Eve? It's a strange cocktail of misunderstanding geology, recycled myths, and outright fabrication. But the funniest thing is that Thomas wasn't even the first to propose such an idea. That significant honor should certainly go to Charles Hapgood, who originally published his influential work, The Path of the Pole, back in the year 1958. His theory of crustal displacement at least caught the attention of Albert Einstein, who sent him a polite letter. That's already more than Thomas ever had, because what he did was take Hapgood's already shaky theory and blow it up to biblical proportions. He added Noah, Atlantis, and a generous dose of Cold War paranoia. So yes, Thomas's evidence doesn't stand up to scrutiny. The physics doesn't work, and the main ideas in his book weren't even original. But still, the CIA classified it, for some reason. And that's exactly what still keeps the story of Adam and Eve afloat. So the main reason why Chan Thomas is still considered a bearer of secret knowledge is his work with aerospace companies and his mysterious connection to the CIA. And that's it. It's all about the context. If you add a CIA classified label, even to a second-rate novel about the end of the world, suddenly it's no longer nonsense, but a forbidden manuscript. Redacted pages don't prove that what's written on them is true. They just create the feeling that it could be true. And in the world of conspiracy theories, the feeling of truth is often stronger than the actual truth. Want to create your own viral conspiracy theory? Here you go, an easy recipe. Step 1. Get a job at the CIA. Seriously. They're hiring. I checked. There are tons of openings, cybersecurity, linguistics, they're even looking for a doctor. Apply now and become a boring therapist by day, a mysterious informant by night. Step 2. You get fired under mysterious circumstances, probably for harassment. But you should hint to everyone else that you saw something. But you can't talk about it. That one sentence will be enough for 15 years of discussion on Reddit. Step 3. Write a book. Make it sound scientific. It doesn't matter if it makes sense. You just need to get it trending. AI apocalypse, ancient nanotechnologies, simulation theory. The weirder, the better. Step 4. Not mandatory, but highly recommended. Black out a few pages with a marker yourself. It doesn't matter what was there. Mystery is marketing, and sometimes that's more than enough. So, what do you say? Let's stir things up on all the conspiracy forums. The Atlantis Code. How AI woke up and flooded the continents. The author is a former CIA operative. Then be sure to tell us in the comments section which experience was easier, getting into the CIA or successfully leaving it.